suppose a man says, I view animated child porn. So there's no real victim in that sense of child pornography, which we both agree is horrendous. And by viewing animated child porn, it prevents me from acting out sexually on a child. Now, I deny that. I think that pornography inflames us to then want to act those fantasies out, and I think there's good studies that back that up. But surely you wouldn't say to the man who views animated child pornography, that's not bad so long as you don't act it out. Wouldn't you want to help this poor sick dude?
Yes, I would, but I'm thrilled that he's not acting it out. I mean,
agreed.
Okay,
of course.
Well, that's big.
Yeah.
We're both thrilled that he might have a poor substitute, but it is a substitute if that were the case. No child is being used. Yeah. It's all animated.
Yeah.
And he.
But would you use the word evil of animated child pornography? Because I certainly would.
No, I would use evil only with behavior. That's where we might differ. Forgetting the sex issue, you can't be evil. You didn't do evil if you thought evil. You did evil if you committed.
If I'm masturbating to animated pictures of pornography, I'm not doing something evil.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's despicable. Yeah.
Really?
Yes, of course.
Who is being hurt? You have to have a victim.
Oh, I'll tell you, there's at least two people being hurt. There's the person who's poisoning himself by encouraging him to think acting out on children, and there's also the animator.
Okay, wait a minute. We both are aching for him not to have those fantasies. I agree with you, but
you won't call it evil.
I won't call a fantasy evil.
No, normal is not defined by your sexual orientation.
Yeah,
that's what normal. I'm not saying heterosexual is more normal. By the way, I actually believe bisexual is the norm. The Bible said, men, you are as happy with boys. I don't mean 8-year-olds, 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
Just as a grown man is happy with a 15-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. But in that sense, homosexuals and heterosexuals are identical.
Hello everyone, I want to talk to you guys about a story that I read today. This is a story from the Talmud. We are now getting into Talmudic studies in this YouTube channel, so get ready, all right? You guys better understand the Talmud. Very, very important stuff to understand for some strange, crazy reason. A very, very pertinent and important story in the Talmud is a story called The Oven of Achnai, or Achnai. I'm pretty certain it's Achnai. This is a story that supposedly takes place, I believe, in the 2nd century AD. And the story goes something like this. There was a new oven that was introduced to the Sanhedrin. You know, that cabal of rabbis that murdered the Messiah, murdered Christ. And this oven was made up of tiles, and there was some nice sand grouting in between the tiles, and it was a very, very nice oven. You know, they probably could bake some very, very nice Middle Eastern bread, some nice Middle Eastern flatbread. You know, the bread that has the sesame seeds on it. They put a little za'atar, little dried oregano on top of it. Really, really Middle Eastern stuff. And instead of the rabbis just saying, wow, what a really nice oven, we can bake some wonderful bread in it. Wonderful, wonderful bread. Let's bake some bread. Avi, shalom, let's get together. What are we doing? This is heaven on earth. Let's bake some bread. Pour a glass of wine. No, the Rebbes start debating about whether or not the oven is actually ritually impure. Yes, so instead of just saying, thank you so much for the wonderful oven, let's bake some bread, they say, is this oven, is it ritually impure? What's going on here? Is this impure? Can we bake bread in it? If we bake bread, are we going to be condemned to hell? Like, what could happen? I'm going to get a heart attack just thinking about it. If I put a loaf of bread in the oven, I want to bake some bread. I mean, what? Could God just strike me down? Maybe a lightning bolt will come from heaven and just kill me. I don't know. Oy vey, what are we going to do? Let's talk to the Rebbes. So the rabbis get together and they have this very, very serious debate over an oven. Yes, that's right, everyone. Over an oven. So they start debating on whether or not the oven is impure or impure or whatever. And there's this one rabbi, his name is Rabbi Eliezer, okay? And Rabbi Eliezer, he says, listen, guys, it's just an oven. The oven is fine. There's nothing wrong with the oven. Just bake some bread in it. Stop worrying too much. You guys are gonna get a heart attack. Just relax. Just bake in the oven. There's no big deal. Blah, 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 blah. Then the other rabbis say, oh no, this oven is impure, I tell you. If you bake a single loaf in this oven, listen, you are gonna be damned for all eternity because the Rebbe says so. So there's this one rabbi, his name is Rabban Gamaliel. Okay, Rabban Gamaliel was I think he was a descendant. He was a descendant of the Gamaliel mentioned in the New Testament, the one who was the rabbinic teacher for St. Paul before he would become St. Paul. But this Gamaliel, Rabban Gamaliel, he hated Christianity. I read a little bit about him. He actually mocked Christians. He did not like Christians at all. A very vicious individual. Rabban Gamaliel says, this oven is impure. So Eliezer, the rabbi who had he had more sense, he said, you guys are crazy. And other rabbis say, no, we're not. You're crazy. The oven is impure. So Rabbi Eliezer says, if the oven is impure, no, he said, if the halakha agrees with me, halakha is Jewish law, not law. If the halakha agrees with me, then let this tree be a testimony to it. Let this tree show that I'm right, or something like that. And there's this tree, and this tree is some kind of it looks kind of like a tamarind tree. I forgot the name of it. I can actually look it up real quick. It's right here, actually. Carob tree. So he says, let the carob tree prove it. If the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, then this carob tree will prove that I'm right. And the carob tree all of a sudden jumps. The tree jumps all of a sudden. And the tree starts to move by itself. And the other rabbis look at this tree moving, and they say, doesn't prove you're right. I mean, yeah, it's very impressive and quite supernatural that the tree all of a sudden jumped out of nowhere and is now walking by itself. But that's not proof in the court of law. So Rabbi Eliezer says, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, the stream will prove it. And all of a sudden, this river starts moving backwards. Yes, the river starts moving backwards. And the rabbis say, who cares? Sure, it's impressive. It's supernatural. It's out of this world. It's crazy. I'll take it's quite amazing, right? But doesn't really prove what we're saying. Doesn't really prove what you're saying in the court of law. So then Eliezer cries out and says, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, the walls of the study hall will prove it. And then all of a sudden, the walls of the study begin to fall. And this one rabbi named Rabbi Yeshua or Joshua ben Hananiah. And ben Hananiah reprimands the walls, and the walls stop collapsing. But in respect to Rabbi Eliezer, they stay in place. They don't go back to where they were before. So Rabbi Eliezer cries out, and he says, if the halakha is in accordance with my opinion, heaven will prove it. And all of a sudden, the voice of God is heard. The voice of God is heard. Or it says that from heaven a voice was heard. So there's a voice that cries out from heaven. Now, if a voice is crying out from heaven, listen. I would listen, because there's no demons up in heaven. So if there's a voice crying out from heaven, I'm going to listen. So there's a voice crying out from heaven, and the voice says, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer as the halakha is in accordance with his opinion in every place that he expresses an opinion? So heaven, in other words, God himself tells the rabbis to agree with Eliezer. And Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah tells this voice from heaven, tells God, the Torah is not in heaven. So the Torah is not in heaven. Therefore, we don't have to listen to you, God. What matters is the opinion of the rabbis. What matters is the election, is the agreement, the majority opinion of the rabbinic council. God smiles, and he declares, My children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me. In other words, in the Talmud, God admits to being defeated by the rabbis. The rabbis defeat God. To use the words of the Talmud, they triumphed over God. All right? They triumphed over God. And the news is sent to Rabbi Eliezer that he will now be ostracized from the Sanhedrin. So Rabban Gamaliel says, not only does God agree with Eliezer, and we reject the voice of God, and we reject Eliezer, even though God says to follow Eliezer, because even though God tells us to follow Eliezer, we reject Eliezer, we triumphed over God, and not only this, even though God tells us to follow Eliezer, we're going to ostracize Eliezer. And so they tell Eliezer to buzz off from the Sanhedrin. And Eliezer begins to weep, and he's depressed, and he's saddened by this. He's in absolute torment about the fact that he has been kicked out of the Sanhedrin. And so he cries, and he weeps, and he cries, and he weeps, and all of a sudden, a third of the crops die out. And Rabban Gamaliel prays to God, and he says, God, it was not to my honor that I ostracized Rabbi Eliezer, but it was for your honor, God. So we rejected what God said. God says, yeah, you guys defeated me. And then Eliezer cries after being kicked out of the Sanhedrin. The crops begin to die out. And then Rabban Gamaliel says, it was for your honor that I ostracized Rabbi Eliezer. So then all of a sudden, everything calms down. There was this storm, right? I guess the storm was the thing that destroyed the crops. And the storm calms down. So Eliezer is crying, and he's in grief that he got kicked out of the Sanhedrin. And all of a sudden, his wife, she sees her husband crying. And Rabbi Eliezer is praying to God in his deep sadness. And Ima Shalom says, his wife, Ima Shalom, that's her name, Ima Shalom says, I am going to prevent God from hearing his prayers. Yeah, this is what I read. This is in the Talmud. She says, I'm going to interfere so that the prayers of my husband are not heard, therefore they can't be answered. And then one day, she gets distracted, and she stops interfering. She stops hindering the prayers from being heard by God. This is wizardry, by the way. I'm going to prevent God from hearing someone's prayers. This is voodoo wizardry. But she gets distracted one day for a moment, and then she doesn't interfere with the prayers. She doesn't hinder the prayers from being heard. And then all of a sudden, Rabban Gamaliel dies because the prayer, I guess Rabbi Eliezer was praying to God to strike Rabban Gamaliel dead, and the wife prevents the prayers from being heard by God. But then the wife gets distracted, and then all of a sudden God hears the prayers and then strikes Rabban Gamaliel dead. It's insanity. But it's not only insane, guys. It's worse than insane. It's blasphemous. This is blasphemous. So reading this story, it now makes sense as to why we see certain weird things in certain behaviors or in certain customs, all right? So I'll give you guys an example. I'll give you guys an anecdotal example from my own life. So I used to live in California. That's where I'm originally from. I was born in the Bay Area. And I used to hang out with Jewish people all the time. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Almost every week, I was hanging out with Jewish people. And I was hanging out mainly with Israeli people. There was this Israeli family that I used to hang out with almost at a weekly basis. And I left California for a while, and I came back to visit California. And of course, when I came to California, I visited my Israeli friends. So I was hanging out with this Israeli family that I used to hang out with all the time when I lived in California. And we went to this pizzeria that was a very favorite place of ours to go to. And so I go to the pizzeria with them and I get a pepperoni pizza. And I'm not doing it in spite of them. I'm not doing it to annoy them or anything like that. I love pepperoni pizza. Nothing against them. They don't order pepperoni pizza. That's fine. Because according to halakhic law, they can't eat pork. Okay, I respect that. I'm not gonna argue with them. I'm not gonna hit them with a breadstick over it. It's just whatever. It's their thing. So they get whatever. They get a cheese pizza, whatever. And I get my little personal pepperoni pizza. And I want to take some pizza back home, so that way if I get hungry at night, I got some pizza, I got some slices to eat. But I was staying at their house, and I put the pizza in a box, and the husband says, that pizza cannot enter the house because it's pork. And the wife, who was Yemeni, she was a Yemeni Jew. She was Mizrahi, which means that her most recent ancestry had roots directly in the Middle East, as opposed to the Ashkenazi Jews, whose ancestry spent probably around a millennium in Europe. But anyway, the wife said, that pizza cannot enter the house. It has to stay in the garage, in the refrigerator in the garage. Oh, that's fine. So I asked her, I said, listen, do you think that God is going to strike you dead, or do you think that God's going to be angry with you if a couple pieces of pepperoni, God forbid, enter your house? And she said yes. And she was very serious with me. She said yes. Okay, fine. What's funny is that the father, the same guy who said the pizza can't enter the house because it has pepperoni on it, he told us in a later discussion that he buys his son's condoms. He buys his son. I said sons, plural. No, his son. He buys his son condoms. So we were talking to him, and I said, well, why do you buy your son condoms? And he said, well, I'm afraid that he'll get a woman pregnant. So I said, well, what if the girl gets pregnant? Then what are you going to do? And he said, well, my son can have an abortion. So let me get this straight. God forbid, a couple of slices of pepperoni enter your door, and the angel of death could come and strike you down. But hey, if your son gets a girl pregnant, kill the child. That's perfectly fine. And I noticed this contradiction. There was this way of thinking that made, what's the word? What's the term? There's an old term. It made a mountain out of a molehill, all right, or a mountain out of an anthill. And that's the type of thing that I used to see. People would just make mountains out of molehills, and they would make molehills out of mountains. So they would see a mountain and say, it's a molehill. And they would see a molehill and say, oh my God, it's a mountain. Pepperoni, God's going to strike you down. Pregnant girlfriend, get an abortion. Who cares? Drop the baby in the food in the food disposal for all we know. Who cares, right? Put the baby in a meat grinder. Who cares? They make little of evil, and they make things that are very trivial into something that's evil. They make things that are trivial into evil things, and they make something that is truly evil and barbaric into something that's not really a big deal. And this is the type of stuff that you would just see all the time. It is just completely crazy. They would go to synagogue, and then you would talk to them in regular conversation, and they're telling you about how they're pro-choice and how they support abortion and all this stuff. And you can point them to the Bible, and you can say, well, you guys are saying things, or you guys agree with things that are unbiblical, you guys agree with things that are barbaric. And they wouldn't give a damn. Why? Because, well, in their religion, they can fool God. Let's just be real here. So I concluded that Judaism is a religion that is dedicated to fooling God. They believe they can fool God. And you can see it right in the Talmud. Eliezer says, if I'm right, then let heaven say that I'm right. And God says Eliezer is right. And the rabbis say, no, he's not. God, you're wrong. And God says, my people have triumphed over me. The rabbis have triumphed over me. So in Judaism, the rabbis triumph over God. And if the rabbis can triumph over God, then the rabbis can supersede all moral principle. The rabbis can eclipse, and the rabbis can cancel out all moral principles. And that's Judaism. That's Talmudic Judaism. And it reminds me of something that I was reading about a couple of days ago. I was reading this article. It was about these settlers, these extremist Jewish people, far-right Jewish extremists, how they have been coordinating these little operations to block aid from entering Gaza. Now, they say that in Gaza, there's a big problem with food insecurity. And they have to send in these trucks full of food. And you have these lunatics, these fanatics, who are blocking the trucks. And I saw this video of a truck that was obviously stopped. And you see these lunatics walking around. And you see the poor truck driver, he's on the floor. It looks like they were about to lynch mob him.
איזה יופי זה. זה מה שקורה למי שמביא אוכל לחמאס. יימח שמו.
The guy was on the floor. He looked injured on the floor. He looked beaten up. And then I read this article saying that there was an Israeli truck driver who was beaten up. So that they don't mind attacking Israelis. They don't mind attacking, obviously, they don't mind attacking Arabs. They can't stand Arabs. They don't like Palestinians. But these people, they have this superiority complex. And their way of thinking is, we are the state. We are the police. We are the government. Because if we can triumph over God, we can triumph over the state. And you see these videos of these pompous settlers stopping trucks and asking the driver for papers. Like they're the freaking Israeli Gestapo all of a sudden. Papers, please. Hand me your papers. You're not the police. Who the hell are you? You're not the police. You're not the military. You're not a government official. You're not an officer. You're nothing. You're a bunch of lunatics. You're a bunch of yeshiva students. All of a sudden, you think you got all this authority. All of a sudden, you guys are crazy. One truck driver really wanted to express this opinion, and he just kept on driving. Yeah, just like that. And he was absolutely right to keep on driving. But they stop the trucks and they coordinate their, I don't want to say missions because it makes it sound like they're doing something that's important and grandeur, but they coordinate their get-togethers where they stop trucks through WhatsApp. WhatsApp is an app that you use to communicate with people. Basically, it's a way to call people and text people through the internet, so that way you don't have to pay money to your phone company, which is great. So they use WhatsApp to coordinate when they're going to get together, when they're going to stop trucks and all that stuff. And there was this one message that was stated in a WhatsApp communication between these people. And one guy says, is it against the halakhic law to stop trucks on Shabbos? And for those of you who don't know, Shabbos is the Sabbath, right? They don't eat, they don't work on Saturdays. So they can't switch a light bulb on, they can't cook anything, they can't drive. Believe it or not, there was this area that I used to go through to go to church years ago, and it was this, I had to go through this Jewish enclave, and there was a synagogue nearby. So every time I would go to church, I would always see these Jews walk into the synagogue. And I would ask, well, why are they walking to the synagogue? Well, I found out that they can't drive on the Sabbath. So I'm thinking they can't drive on the Sabbath because they can't work on the Sabbath. But so that means they have to walk, but isn't walking work? I mean, is that crazy, guys? Isn't walking more work than driving? You can't drive because it's work on Shabbos. But you have to walk. Well, isn't walking I'm burning more calories walking, right? It takes more energy to walk than to drive. So you see all these, even in the middle of summer, you saw these religious Jews with their religious attire walking on the side of the road, sweating like like boiled eggs, but they're not working. Right? They can't turn a light on. God forbid you switch a light on. You can have an abortion. That's fine. You can stop aid trucks from delivering food to children in the middle of a war zone. You can stop those trucks. That's fine. But God forbid you stop the trucks on Shabbos. And then some guy in the What's Up conversation says something like, the rabbi says that it's okay, guys. You can stop food trucks, aid trucks on the Sabbath. That's fine. So the sin is not, the concern is not, hey, is stopping trucks that are delivering food to malnourished children in a war zone a sin? That's not their concern. The concern is, hey, is stopping trucks delivering food to malnourished children in a war zone a sin if it's done on the Sabbath? You see how sick this is? It's sick. But it goes back to the Talmud. These people believe that they can triumph over God. They believe that they can overrule God. And they believe that they can fool God. That's what these people believe in. For example, okay, they believe they can't switch a light bulb on the Sabbath. Okay, that's what they believe. You can't switch a light on the Sabbath. Okay, whatever.
Moses.
Huh?
Can we use a fridge on Shabbos?
Yes, we can. If you put it on Shabbos mode, check this out. Options and light. 2, 1, 0. Shabbos mode.
And what does that do?
Well, that makes sure that the refrigerator stays one temperature at all times, no matter what you do.
And the lights don't turn on.
That's right, Zipporah.
Hey, Moses, can we use a light on Shabbos?
Absolutely. If the light was turned on before Shabbos, we can leave all the lights on. Some people have timers, and that's fine as well. But we will not turn on or off.
Here is the halachic perspective. Contrary to public knowledge, work is absolutely permitted on Shabbat. What is forbidden is melacha. Melacha is better translated as production. One is forbidden to produce on Shabbat. There are 39 general things halacha considers production. Cooking, for example, is taking raw food and changing it to cooked food. That is a form of production. If one mixes ingredients and prepares food for hours, they did not necessarily break Shabbat. The moment they lift the pot and place it on the fire, as easy as it may seem, that is when they broke Shabbat.
Meet Kosher Switch, patented technology endorsed by leading poskim and Orthodox rabbis, facilitating the on-demand control of electricity on Shabbat while making Chilul Shabbos impossible. Anyone who's observant experiences frustrations with electricity on Shabbat and Yom Tov. During one Shabbat, when the timer, the ubiquitous Shabbos clock, prematurely decided that dinner was over, I sat in the dark and thought, it's the 21st century, there's got to be a better way. Using my tech background, I was zochet to invent a method that leverages technology to enhance the observance and enjoyment of Shabbat. That's how Kosher Switch was born. Kosher Switch is not a grumma or indirect causation device. It's actually an ungrumma switch. It lets us have lights on or off as needed, instead of scrambling to predict those needs minutes before Shabbat. Kosher Switch reinforces a religious lifestyle that's also environmentally friendly by curbing needlessly wasted electricity. It also eliminates the accidental use of traditional light switches. Through its ease of use, Kosher Switch makes Sabbath observance attainable and maintainable by the masses. It also mitigates the prohibitions involving the often misused Shabbos goy.
Excuse me, ma'am. Hi, I need a big favor. My bedroom, the lights are on, so I was wondering if maybe you could come up to my bedroom and...
Are you crazy? I ain't coming up to your bedroom.
Yeah, but the lights are on.
You're crazy.
But techno-halachic innovation is useless unless it also conforms with Jewish law. That's why we sought to validate Kosher Switch's halachic feasibility from day one. During years of R&D, we've been privileged to meet with Torah giants who have analyzed, endorsed, and blessed our technology and endeavors.
So I saw this video of this guy showing a refrigerator, and he says, yeah, I got this fridge, and there's a button on the fridge that says Shabbos mode. So you press the button, right? You put the fridge on Shabbos mode. So guess what happens? When the fridge is on Shabbos mode, you open up the fridge and the light stays off. Light doesn't turn on. So, okay, so in your religion, okay, you believe God doesn't want you to turn lights on the Sabbath. So you find ways to keep the lights off so that you can do things. As long as the light is off, you can do things, and that's fine. You're just trying to fool God. That's what it is. Well, I'm not really turning a light on, or I think they have this thing where they have this Shabbos light switch or something. I saw that thing. I mean, it's just crazy, right? Talmudic Judaism is a religion that's dedicated to fooling God. There's a verse in the Bible where God even says, I don't even honor your fasts. I forget which verse this was, but God says, I don't even honor your fasts. Because even when you're fasting, you're already thinking about screwing over your neighbor, something like that. But it shows that even in the time of the Old Testament, people were trying to fool God. I'm fasting, God, but I'm also planning on doing something evil to someone else. It's just amazing to me. But the whole thing is about fooling God. And it's right there in the Talmud. It's right there in the Talmud. Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, then God will say something, or that let heaven testify that I'm right. And God says, Eliezer is right. And they said, no. And God says, my children have triumphed over me. My children have outsmarted me. So it's all about being smart. It's all about outsmarting everybody, even God himself. Not even Islam is this blasphemous. Not even Islam is this blasphemous. It's not. Anyway, yeah, I'm happy that I got this video done. I really wanted to do this video. I wanted to do this video the day before yesterday, guys, but I didn't get a chance because I'm stuck doing all this work. I'm doing another job right now that's outside of this realm of work, but I'm happy that I can do this video for you guys. Hope you guys are enjoying your Friday evening or your Saturday, wherever you are. I always feel a little bit bad when I don't do a Friday stream, and I always feel bad when I don't upload a video. Because I really, really love doing this channel, and I love talking to you guys, and yeah, I love working in this YouTube channel, and I love expressing my thoughts and expressing my ideas. It's a beautiful thing, the internet is. I mean, the internet is obviously used for evil, but there's a lot of beautiful things that can be done on the internet, like people expressing their opinions to each other. It's a wonderful thing, guys. It's a wonderful life. Anyway, hope you guys are doing well. And yeah, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.